Welcome back to the Philosophy for Philistines channel on this February the 8th. Momentous week. The narrative is collapsing. Trudeau and his government have no clue how to deal with the strike going on downtown, because that's what it is. And I want to remind all you lefties that claim you believe in the working class. Communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling class tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite. This translation is the authorized translation by Marx and Engels and is the most commonly used version in English. And yet, what do we see with those that claim to sympathize with the left? Nothing but rage, contempt, and hatred, mischaracterization, and outright lies against the truckers' rally. And this just in from Ezra Levant, that in Canada, in all its inclusivity and wisdom, has just arrested Pastor Artur Pawlowski outside of his home as he was heading to speak to a truckers' rally in Coutts, Alberta. So it's now become illegal for pastors to go give spiritual counseling and advice to the working class. I wonder what it would take for Canadians to wake up and realize that we are being governed by oligarchs. And there's a history to this corruption. And it goes right back to Power Corps and the people that run that firm, the Desmarais family. They have long links to the echelons of power in Canada. Desmarais is such a major power broker in Canada, he has intimate contacts with the past 4 Canadian PMs. Most Canadians don't know Paul Desmarais at all. You could stop the first 1,000 people walking down Yonge Street and I'll bet no one would know who he is. But the few who do know him as the kingmaker behind Pierre Trudeau, Brian Mulroney, Jean Chrétien, and Paul Martin. Jean Chrétien's daughter is married to Paul Desmarais' son. Paul Martin was an employee of M. Desmarais' Power Corps, and his Canadian Steamship Lines was originally a subsidiary of Power Corps that M. Desmarais put Mr. Martin in charge of. In other words, Paul Martin's public identity, successful self-made businessman, not just a career pole, shows how to meet payroll, etc., is entirely derived from the patronage of M. Desmarais. This in itself is a remarkable achievement. Imagine if Jenna Bush married the chairman of Halliburton's son, and then George W. Bush was succeeded by a president who had been an employee of Halliburton. Michael Moore's next documentary would be buried under the wall-to-wall Oscars in Palms d'Or. But M. Desmarais has managed to turn Ottawa into a company town without anyone being aware of the company. That was written on March the 15th, 2005, before Paul Desmarais' death. But it gets worse. Montreal's Power Corps, this is from December 15th, 2019, deepens ties with China's prominent Bo family. Deep in bed with China. Red-handed, obviously, and here's another article from how Beijing bought off the Trudeaus. And this is from, just posted yesterday, February 7th, 2022. In the Adara Press. All the links to these articles will be below. You can read them for yourself. I never ask anyone to believe anything that I'm saying. I can only share the facts with you. The facts that the mainstream media will never share. Red-handed, obviously my family has historical ties with China. How Beijing bought off the Trudeaus. Leftist Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has followed in his father's footsteps, being both assuming the high office and using it to further the interests of Chinese Communist Party. Peter Schweitzer writes in his best-selling Red-Handed, How American Elites Got Rich Helping China Win. The book, which documents the cozy financial and political relations between the Chinese government and some of the most powerful people in the West, revealed decades of both ideological and financial ties between Beijing and the Trudeaus, beginning with the elder Trudeau visiting China in 1960 and meeting Mao Zedong, among other communist leaders. Rather than being appalled by the Great Leap Forward, which was going on at the time, Trudeau and travel pal Jacques Hébert left the country enamored by a communism enough to write a propaganda book titled Two Innocents in Red China. The Great Leap Forward killed as many as 45 million people and is described by the Washington Post as the biggest mass murder in the history of the world. Yet it remained conspicuously absent in the narrative of the two innocents. The book describes Mao as a superb strategist and proclaims it is these red scarf kids who in 20 years will be the new men of a country which at that time will have 1 billion inhabitants. In an interesting coincidence, the elder Trudeau ideological fealty to communism red-handed details which also signified profitable. Trudeau has benefited from the support of businessman Paul Desmarais, the head of a company called Power Corps that specializes in building business ties to China. In 1978, the Power Corporation formed the Canadian-China Business Council with former Prime Minister Trudeau's support, Schweitzer writes, noting that the Canada-China Business Council was a key tool for Beijing to foster ties to powerful Canadian politicians to the benefit of the Communist Party. Trudeau and Desmarais guided Canada's relationship with Beijing, with Trudeau as Prime Minister pushing closer ties with the regime while Desmarais cashed in on significant deals with Beijing's elite, Schweitzer writes. When Trudeau retired from politics, he went to work at Power Corps, further nurturing those deals and becoming wealthy in the process. The elder Trudeau worked consulting Canadian businesses on how to get rich in China, bringing business to the Communist Party in the process. These business ties were only possible because Trudeau spearheaded the establishment of diplomatic ties to Beijing at Taiwan's expense in 1970. The younger Trudeau has similarly pushed policies in Canada and Canadian politics that enriched the Chinese government. In 2012, Schweitzer reports that Justin Trudeau outlined his support for a controversial energy deal involving the Chinese National Offshore Oil Corporation, which was seeking to acquire the Canadian energy company Nexen. There were concerns about the significant implications to national security and possible damage to Canada's interests and values. Trudeau justified his support for the deal in part because, according to Schweitzer, obviously, my father has historical ties with China. Trudeau has also faced a barrage of criticism for depending on China for pivotal infectious disease supplies at the height of the first wave of the Chinese coronavirus pandemic. Trudeau's government chose Chinese companies over Canadian ones to purchase masks, gloves, and other personal protective equipment, outraging much of the population. Canada had to scramble to replenish its supplies of this equipment, buying it from China, because Trudeau gave away much of it in free foreign aid to China. So after buying it from China, he gave it back to China. Trudeau's ties to China have, on occasion, stretched the limits of Canadian law. In 2016, for example, the Globe and Mail revealed that Trudeau had attended a fundraiser in which he had a private conversation with China's businessman Zhang Bin, who then promptly donated 1 million Canadian dollars to Pierre Trudeau Foundation. Zhang was, in addition to a businessman, a Chinese regime advisor, making him essentially a lobbyist for the CCP. It goes on and on. You read it for yourself. Listen, we are governed by a mafia. And one of the things the mafia has to do is to appear to be innocuous. In other words, wherever the mafia operates, it doesn't want the average person to know what's going on. Dr. Peterson made a point that for years Canadian institutions have worked so well that people just trusted their government. I only agree with him to a point. What happened was that the Canadian institutions appeared to be working well, while behind the scenes they were being utterly corrupted by our relationship with communist regimes and foreign powers. We are governed by a mafia that has now grown so bold that it can no longer hide its utter contempt, even for the ideology which itself claims to lay affinity to. Our country has become utterly cultural Marxist, and as with any other country that has adopted Marxism, in fact, they hate the working class and will murder them if they can. These next few hours, these next few days, and Tucker Carlson warned about this when he spoke with Ezra Levant. What's Trudeau going to do next? Since he's lost control of this whole scenario. What's he going to do? Is he going to go full Castro on the protest in Ottawa, which is largely peaceful? This all remains to be seen, but it is something that we need to pray and think about. The great American historian who's written a book on this subject, what's the gentleman's name? Victor Hansen, said that 2022 is going to be a pivotal year because the narrative, it's falling apart. It's falling apart here in Canada, and it's falling apart in the US. Our governmental institutions have become utterly corrupted by neo-Marxists that have taken the long march through them. It's time to take them back and restore limited constitutional democracy to both the US and to Canada. God bless you all. Pray like you've never prayed before. Pray for those folks downtown. Have a great day.